Greetings, my fellow freedom loving sovereign thinkers, LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida, and today's date is Tuesday, September 4th, 2018. So let us begin. Alright, folks, thank you for tuning in. Yep, Labor Day weekend has ended, so I'm going to be going back to school, work, and all that good stuff. Yeah, it's been raining here most of the weekend. Disappointing for some of the areas like the Hermitage District and so forth. But that's just part of Mother Nature, I would say. Yeah, it's disappointing, but you know what? Other days will come. So, hopefully everyone be safe and tend your families and all that good stuff. Great picnics, etc. Alright, so I'm going to be talking some topics here. And this one came out, Free Thought Project, and went through the activist post. Never forget, government said the air was safe. Now thousands of 9/11 first responders have cancer. As it reads here, this is by Derek Bros. As Americans prepare for the 17th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, nearly 10,000 first responders and New York City residents have reported 9/11 related cancers. In early August, the New York Post reported on newly released numbers of reported 9/11 related illnesses, including 9,795 total cases of 9/11 related cancer. The numbers were released by the federally funded World Trade Center Health Program. According to the program, there have been more than 400 documented cases of death from 9/11 related cancers. However, unfortunately, the plight of the men and women who rushed into Ground Zero on September 11, 2001 and the following months is often forgotten in the public conversation. 17 years after the attacks, the first responders are still fighting for their lives. On Thursday, the Los Angeles Times reported 15 FBI agents have died from cancers linked to the exposure of various toxins during investigation and cleanup of the wreckage. The Times notes that the 3 FBI agents have died since March. In addition, 12 News in Westchester reports that Kathleen O'Connor, a 20-year veteran with the New Rochelle Police Department, recently died from her 9/11 related illness. WECT News reports that retired NYPD detective Chuck McLivery dies with skin allergies and a crushed hand due to his role as a first responder. The former detective spent nearly every day for 6 months working 12-hour shifts, often without breathing protection. We make light of it, joke about it, but you're always just wondering, am I next? Or is the guy or girl sitting next to, are they a walking time bomb that's going to explode? You get tired of going to funerals, McLivery told WECT. All you can see for miles and miles was big plumes of black billowing smoke. As you can see, was stuff falling down out of the air. The air was so thick, it's like you could have waved your hand, like being in a new storm. The New York Daily News also recently announced the death of retired firefighter Michael McDonald, who died from lung and brain cancer from the 9/11 cleanup efforts. McDonald's entire career was spent at Ladder 128 in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. I'm originally from that district in Brooklyn, just to let you folks know. With this death, he becomes the 181st member of the FDNY to die from 9/11 related illnesses. The New York Daily News notes that this is more than half of the 343 FDNY members killed during the collapse of the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001. As NYPD spokesman told the Daily that 185 city cops have died of illnesses connected to their time as first responders. Each of these stories offer a small glimpse into the everyday reality of these first responders. They are literally watching their friends and associates die around them, while the American people pay little attention. How did this happen? How did we get to the point where nearly 10,000 people who risked their lives to help others are waiting to die from cancer? One week after the 9/11 attacks, the Environmental Protection Agency Administrator and former governor of New Jersey, to be exact, Christine Todd Whitman released a statement declaring the air and water surrounding Ground Zero to be safe and to breathe and drink. I remember her saying that too. That is nothing to worry about. That really blew my confounded mind. I was thinking of my father that day. He is rolling in his grave today. Since that time, firefighters, EMTs, police officers, and volunteers who remained at Ground Zero looking for survivors and bodies have found themselves falling victims to breathing illness, cancer, and other sicknesses likely related to inhaling dust consisting of building materials, computers, and human bodies. Don't forget asbestos, too. Truth Media reported on the situation back in May 2007. A congressional investigation was launched into the EPA's role in properly responding to the environmentalist crisis and air quality emergency in the immediate wake of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center. Former EPA Commissioner Christine Todd Whitman refused to testify, despite the fact that her statements on air quality after 9/11 had immediately affected hundreds of thousands of rescue workers and New York residents, and more broadly, millions, including across the bay, to be exact, or the river. Until she was pressured under threat of subpoena by Congressman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York City, whose district includes Lower Manhattan. However, she was officially cleared of any wrongdoing and defeated multiple lawsuits. I can say this, my friends, she was a patsy. Congress, for its part, did pass the James Zardroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act, which is designed to provide medical services and compensation for first responders. However, critics say the government is not doing enough to help those who volunteer their livelihood in the wake of the largest terror attack on American soil. If these brave men and women chose to put themselves in harm's way based on a lie, that needs to be investigated and those responsible held accountable. I completely agree. In less than 2 weeks, the corporate media and conniving politicians will put on their never forget pins and release the obligatory condolences to the family members of the 9/11 victims. There will be TV specials and special edition magazines and newspapers to commemorate the terror attack. But will these display pay tribute or raise awareness about the plight of the first responders? Will these photo ops actually question the official 9/11 story of 9/11? If the answer is no, if the American public is still not ready to challenge the establishment lies surrounding 9/11, September 11, 2001, then we have to move no closer to truth, and these men and women are dying in vain. On the 17th anniversary of 9/11, remember to question the official story. I have to agree completely with Mr. Bros. I was 32 years old at that time this horrific event occurred. And I remember Christine Todd Whitman said there was nothing to worry about the air quality. And like I said before, my father is rolling in his grave. I was completely dumbfounded. Then, of course, the World Trade Center cough happened to a lot of them as well. If I'm correct, Donna Summers died of lung cancer. And if I remember, she did live in that area of New York City. So to all you folks out there, that's the day in the week to put out this information. What is your view on September 11th, 2001? Many of us here, including myself, still talk about it today. I just talked about it to a friend of mine at the poorhouse in Fort Lauderdale. Question the official narrative. I do say it's a New World Order agenda, regardless. Rogue elements from the government, whether it's from the United States, Britain, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Yes, I do recall the dancing Israelis on TV. And there's an interview from a police officer that was on American Free Press podcast. Look that up. Dancing Israelis. But they say that's being anti-Semitic. Absolutely not. I'm tired of the witch hunt propaganda saying the Muslims are behind it. Muhammad Atta was a cokehead, for goodness sakes. A drunk. I do remember the whole South Florida connection. And even Robert Mueller on his ordeal with the Sarasota probe of 9/11. Covered up there. FloridaBulldog.org. Look it up. I'm not going to put all those multiple links on there, but a lot of you folks that listen to my show understand where I'm coming from. And even Truth Rising, regardless if you like Alex Jones or not, was still a very good documentary. Giving you a bigger picture. Luke Rudowski, We Are Change, and many others. And I'm still pissed about it today. I get inspired, feel mourn when I think about it. A lot of beautiful people died that day. Completely unacceptable. Just an example how these parasites treat folks around the world. And what happened on that day is just a very annoying event. What's going on in Yemen? That has something to do with 9/11 or what happened in Iraq? What does that have to do with 9/11? Absolutely nothing. Tired of all the BS and garbage and all that. I don't follow the hype, my friends. I look for the truth. I'm not the only one. For a fact. So during that, like I said before, share with everyone you know, especially on that day. They all want to help us on the call. 9/11 Patriot Day. Not patriot. It's very unpatriotic. And I don't regret saying it. So all you folks out there, stay vigilant. Share this with everyone you know. Because everyone has the right to know the truth. Enough said about this. Next one here came from Free Thought Project as well, via activist post. Forget Russia. Social media giants banning alternative voices will directly influence elections. By Matt Agrist. As the Russian hacking conspiracy theorists continue pinning away in their relentless attempt to prove Russian interference in the United States 2016 elections, Americans in general are unaware of the far more sinister interference taking place right now in the form of their social media news feed. Social media giants like Google, Facebook, and Twitter have gone on the offensive in the past few weeks and executed on a full-on purge of various accounts they claim violated their terms of use. While it's certainly within the rights of these companies to refuse service to anyone they like, their influence in the political sphere should not be overlooked. You click of a mouse, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple effectively erased Alex Jones from their platform earlier this month. While many people cheered his removal of Jones, conservatives included, because they're a bunch of cowards, wussies, Uncle Toms and Aunt Jemimas, Orwellian snowflakes. Because of his vitriolic and often closed-minded approach, it was just the beginning on a full-on press to silence those who challenged the status quo. Since Alex Jones was banned, individuals on the right and left found themselves being purged from the interwebs. Or others have found themselves on the other end of a shadow ban so massive that they would reach more people yelling from a street corner than tweeting or posting to their tens of thousands and even millions of fans. While there are currently no metrics to show how large of an effect these bans, shadow bans, and suspensions have been silencing voices who attempt to put forward a narrative that challenges the status quo. No one would be completely out of it if not to realize the implications of such control over information. To put this into perspective, let's assume for a moment that the Russian government actually did launch a massive social media campaign aimed at influencing elections, and they had countless bots doing this for them. Even if they had millions of users actively putting out disinformation, their dissent would be essentially powerless to the almighty algorithm who could and already has castrated their reach with the click of a mouse. Last month, literally overnight, Facebook deleted thousands of pages they say were linked to Russia. Consequently, a leftist page was set up to counter the right-wing Unite the Right rally in D.C. that claims it was not linked to Russia at all. Was also taken down. Last month, veteran activist Noam Chomsky accused Israel of brazenly interfering in U.S. electoral politics in a way that vastly outweighs any effort that may have carried out by Russia, and he's right. First of all, if you're interested in foreign interference in our elections, whether the Russians may have done barely counts or weighs in the balance as compared with another state does, openly, brazenly, and with enormous support, he said. However, there is no mention of Israel's interference by any of the social media giants because they promote the established agenda of constant war and growing the police state. Whether or not Google wants to admit, their censoring of anti-war channels on YouTube and their bans of Alex Jones and the like will have a direct effect on the information people gather in making the decision on who to vote for. The exact same thing can be said about Facebook as well. A small function in the algorithm could even be used deliberately to steer entire populations into a certain camp. The powers these companies have over the flow of information is enormous, and is not some conspiracy theorists to point this out either. Of course, we aren't calling for Facebook or Google to be regulated or banned, but if this information control is not called out, it will inevitably lead to total control. All the Russian influence and trolls in the world work constantly to push out this information. Don't have the power to do what Google can do with their fine lines of code. In a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, Hillary Clinton's former pollster Mark Penn laid out the ominous nature of the censorship and control that these tech giants wield over society. The pair discussed Alex Jones and noted how neither one of them cared for his antics, but his silencing is just the tip of the iceberg that will become total information control. It's not really about Alex Jones, is it? It's about the idea that companies can make impossible for your voice to be heard. Is that a president you should feel comfortable with? Asked Carlson. I think you have to be worried about big tech becoming Big Brother, answered Penn. It's not just him, Jones, says Carlson. There are many like him who've been yanked like him, less known, but still. This has political implications. You have managed and campaigned for so long. This must have occurred. A lot of political debate takes place on social media platforms. If they can clamp down on one side of the debate, why wouldn't that influence an election's outcome? Obviously, it could have a big influence on elections, increasingly because where people turn for their news is that they look at the news feeds that are run by the major social media companies. They are more powerful than any TV station, more powerful than Fox, said Penny, and he's right. But that doesn't have to be the case. While the future of social media may seem bleak, there is also amazing news on the side of innovation of free thought. Those who have been paying attention, they saw the problem presented by so many people using a similar system that is ultimately controlled by those who have an interest in mining your data for profit, controlling the political narrative, and essentially creating a personal database of billions of people, the likes of which corrupt governments salivate over. Instead of trying to change the system from within, several individuals came together to build a new system, which showed the obsolescence of the old. Thus, Steemit was born. Steemit, using blockchain technology, enables rewarding comments and posts with secure tokens of value, which means its users actually get paid to be on it. There are a bunch of networks just like Steemit as well. DuckDuckGo is also an amazing search engine that doesn't track you or filter results like Google does. The options are here. If we don't want to be manipulated, we just have to be willing to use it. Will you embrace the system of corporatism and government information control, or will you choose to abstain from this system and grow the new one that is based on freedom and liberty? The choice is yours. And I have to agree. I haven't really finished my Steam account, but I'm going to take the initiative on making that happen. However, that's why I'm on other multimedia sites. Even Minds.com is going to be a big thing too, because I know it's been talked about. So, and there's plenty of other sites I've been using. Some small, which is fine. But all you got to do, my friends, is look and make your own judgment. Truth of the matter is big mainstream tech giants need us more we need them. It's very disturbing what's happened to many of these sites being purged. I find it unacceptable. I was even real critical of Telesur. English got banned. Of course, I believe on Facebook. And even Breitbart said no. And like I said, like them or not, they support freedom of the press. And you gotta give it to you guys. You guys see all these websites, news websites, standing side by side on this, regardless of their differences. Because if one gets screwed, who's gonna be next? It's called one big domino effect. And that's why it's okay to use enemies' tools. I do it all the time. And everyone out there needs to see things a lot broader. So observe responsibly and be vigilant. All right, next one here came out early September, yeah, and it's from LibyanWarTheTruth.com. And I haven't really been keeping tabs on this, but it says a great tribe is in Libya. Libyan people begin to cleanse Tripoli of terrorist militias. And it says here the great tribes of Libya have begun their cleansing of the terrorists brought into their country illegally by NATO in 2011 invasion of Libya. These terrorists include groups such as Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, Ansar al-Sharia, ISIS, Salafist, Wahhabist, and other assorted small criminal mercenary militia gangs. All these militia gangs have been controlling Tripoli since 2011 illegally. These terrorists are working with the UN government puppet, appointed by the UN, headed by the criminal Sareja, without any authority or vote of the Libyan people. These terrorist gangs answer to no laws or rules. They roam the streets, armed, and attack or steal at will. The Libyan people have suffered under these gangs ever since NATO, Obama, Clinton, McCain, and others invaded their country with the NATO using a false flag lie of a revolution to justify their war crimes. Today, many of the largest tribes in Libya joined the Tarhona tribe near Tripoli to support them in the cleansing of the rubbish controlling the city of Tripoli. The people of Libya, who are all members of the tribes and represented by the tribes, have had enough. Recently, as I reported earlier, 45 young men were sentenced to death by a kangaroo court made up of criminal militias. These young men had broken no laws. Their only crime was being members of the Libyan army fighting against NATO invaders in 2011. There was just one more criminal act that pushed the Libyan tribes over the edge, even though the tribes have no support from outsiders like the militia, who receives weapons and money from the U.S. via Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Sudan. The great tribes of Libya have joined together to take back their sovereignty no matter what. Terrorist gangs, militias, fearing the loss of their golden goose, have called their brothers terrorists from all over Libya to support them in the battle. These terrorists, Salafists and Wahhabists, Atal, are being flown into the Matiga Airport in Tripoli. The Matiga Airport, the old Realist Air Force base, is being controlled by terrorists. So, as the world watches the great tribes of Libya stand alone with all their Libyan brothers and sisters, take on the New World Order and their proxy army of terrorists, we ask the people of the world to stand with their Libyan brothers and sisters as they fight the Zionist world order, Khazarian Mafia Cabal. The Cabal has taken their country by illegal means and placed their criminals on the ground to keep the Libyan people from their security and sovereignty. The great tribes of Israel are showing the world how to fight. They deserve your support and your respect. God bless them all as they fight against the evil that is permeating the entire world today. And I was one of those proud Americans that were strongly opposed the attack of this nation. Sometimes Gaddafi has his shady, rough edges. I'm not going to agree with him on everything. However, he stopped playing ball with the globalists. Another thing, too, yeah, he was a Muslim by faith. But come to Sharia law, it was illegal in that nation. The mainstream news is not going to tell you that because they suck at it. And I want these parasites to be taken out. They should leave, or force is necessary, so be it. I stand on principles, my friends. That's the main objective here. I never liked this from the very beginning. Hasn't new me being a socialist sympathizer or anything like that. It's just foreign entanglements are extremely dangerous. And why the hell are tax dollars, talk about the folks in the United States, being extorted for this atrocity? I don't see people going after Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Why is that? Because they're a bunch of her conformist cowards. Let the great tribes of Libya counter these demoniacs. Because I know one thing. When that time comes, the world will be shocked. But I'll be paying a toast to them. Blessings to the brothers and sisters in Libya. Whatever you do, fight for principle. Nothing more. Including your families, your friends, and enemies if desired. Gotta unite for this common cause. Okay, so next one here actually came from. I'll do two more from Mises.org. This is fun. It came out on Labor Day. Scabs are the true Labor Day heroes. This is by Gary Gals. As long as I can remember, unions have attacked at Scabs those willing to accept work for wages and conditions those unions reject, even if it involves crossing union picket lines. In fact, that usage goes back centuries from English slang for a mean, low, scurvy, rascal, or scoundrel, as Stephanie Smith put it in Household Words. From blemish to strikebreaker, the history of the word scab shows the displacement of a meaning from a visceral or physical to the moral register, just as a scab is a physical lesion. The strike-breaking scab disfigures the social body of labor. Those union attacks have included some of my real fist-in-your-face examples, such as the following, generally attributed to Jack London. And gotta finish the rattlesnake, the toad, the vampire. He has some awful substance left which he made, a scab. No man has a right to scab so long as there is a pool of water to drown his carcass in, or rope long enough to hang his body with. Few current examples can match that level of vituperation, but scab remains near surface. For instance, when Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner responded to a 2017 strike authorization with the website enabling citizens to apply for government positions, the result was cry of scabs filling the public airways. Union rhetoric asserts that scabs are harmful to workers, but they offer no proof of harm. So as we come to another Labor Day of union claims to advance workers' interests, perhaps that name-calling should be considered more carefully. Debaters known to advance their most convincing argument. However, calling someone a scab is an ad hominem against a man attack, not an argument. It amounts you are bad, therefore your argument position is wrong. But bad people sometimes have better arguments than good people who can sometimes argue nonsense. Consequently, asserting badness implies nothing about the badness of any particular argument position, given that yelling scab is the most frequent and often only argument unions offer against such people. One could conclude they have no real argument. Further, even if someone considers you bad, you still retain your unalienable rights from the Declaration of Independence and the guarantee of equal treatment under the law from the Constitution. Those must be equally held by you all. Yet denying others the ability to offer their labor services in competition with union members who reject their employers' offers denies both their economic liberty and their right to equal treatment. It also denies employers' rights. An employer holds the right to decide who it will hire or continue to employ. Prior to signing the contract, worker has no claim to a job. Workers acquire ownership interest in their jobs only if their contract creates one. But unions treat a certification vote as giving members rights to their job that would be violated if a scab took them. How do workers without any individual ownership right to deny competition from others conjure up those rights right for themselves as a union, overriding employers, right? In essence, the basis of calling someone a scab is only their willingness to work for less than union demands. But is that bad? If a store offers you lower prices of what you want to buy, you don't call them names. You seek out bargains, without which are the fruit of competition. So, what makes monopoly good when your union labor is involved, but bad otherwise? Remember, the Wagner Act has to define labor as not a commodity, or antitrust law would have made unions illegal. The only reason is narrow self-interest. You don't want anything to undermine the current terms of your job, even if it was extracted with government-delegated coercive union power, but such a possibility only threatens unions, not workers' interests. In fact, it is the treatment of unions, not scabs, that harms workers. At the higher wages, unions extract fewer jobs are available. Those crowded of such opportunities go elsewhere, increasing labor supply for non-union jobs, the lowers earnings of existing workers as well as entrants seeking such jobs, which make up the vast majority of workers, because higher costs result as well. Workers also pay higher prices as consumers and taxpayers. In other words, scabs should not be the mean. They are part of the solution to unions, bleeding compensation from employers beyond what workers could get in an open labor market. Then the defamation belongs instead to unions whose assault and battery cuts against employers' interests create scabs of those whose only offense is seeking an open market for their livelihoods. It's an interesting article, and he's talking about a person who was a union man himself. I don't really find it offensive to be very sincere. You have to look at everything in a bigger picture. Of course, cost of living and all that. True. And of course, we got to remember one thing too, friends. The United States is living under a fiat currency. That doesn't help out. It affects labor everywhere. In addition, based on the Union Workers Bible, demands of the workers, the unions, has to be fair. Because if you shaft them, the employer, jobs get cut, people lose their jobs, including folks in unions. All right, so you have to see that as well. Work with their budgets to be fair and in good faith. Because the whole goal is this, is not to suck people dry, but prosper together. That's what I got from my Union Workers Bible. But it looks like a lot of those folks out there have forgotten those principles. And I can say that in good faith because I chat with people. So that's how you got to look at it. And have qualified people to do their job. Unions. You can't just pick them up on the damn streets. I got stationed. We never had a wrench. We used a wrench before? No. Why the hell are you here? Apprentice programs and all that. It's just to build things, make it better. And you know what? The employees appreciate that when you have that transparency with them. But hey, they hire. So this is why you got to look at that in that perspective. But you know what? Sometimes you got to say, hey, that's what the open market's about. Supply and demand. All right. Do one more here. It came out on the 31st of August. It says here, people love to move to states Paul Krugman hates most. By Robert P. Murphy. In a recent column titled Capitalism, Socialism, and Unfreedom, Paul Krugman lambasted libertarians for equating freedom with minimal government. He ridiculed that recently updated Cato Index that ranks the 50 U.S. states according to their freedom defined in this fashion. Because he lived in New York State, he came in dead last in the Cato ranking. Krugman sarcastically asked a commissar in his piece for permission to talk, and in his tweet promoting the column. Krugman said he was writing from a socialist hellhole of Manhattan, besides mocking the apparent libertarian claim that New York State was somehow dangerously low in freedom. Krugman's substantive point was that American values other things besides freedom from government intervention. For example, workers in New York State might enjoy the relatively strong unions and Medicaid coverage. Yet, as I'll point out, Krugman's column is riddled with problems. Even his jokes blow up in his face. Krugman is free from self-awareness. Before diving into the meat of the dispute, let me note something hilarious. Literally the day after Krugman mocks the Cato Institute for ranking the U.S. states according to their freedom, such as the state in last place, New York, must be a socialist hellhole. Ha ha! Krugman wrote a column warning his readers that freedom was on the verge of disappearing in America. Of course, everything on the Krugman macroeconomics, trade, health, and social policy and politics. As you can see in the screenshot above Krugman's archive, on August 26th, he poo-pooed the libertarian warnings about big government. Then on August 27th, Krugman was warning about autocracy coming in the back door. What makes Krugman's 24-hour turnabout even more hilarious, that his August 27th piece relies on alleged examples of Republicans and state governments violating democratic principles. To sum it up, Krugman says Cato Institute is a bunch of paranoid nutjobs who are arguing that New York State has the lowest freedom in the country. But Krugman is allowed to argue that Republicans say that North Carolina are implementing versions of European fascism. Having fun with statistics. In order to show how supposedly silly the Cato study is, Krugman produces a scatter plot pitting the Cato score of states' freedom against that state's infant mortality rate. He displays his chart in the following commentary. The other day I had some fun with the Cato Institute Index of Economic Freedom across states, which finds Florida the freest and New York as the least free. It's okay for me to write this, Comrade Commissar. As I pointed out, Florida Cato Institute seems to be associated with, among other things, high infant mortality, live free and die. New Hampshire is just behind Florida on infant mortality rate. So, that's interesting there. Before pointing out that problem with it, let's make sure we understand Krugman's ostensible point. In the x-axis above, we have a state Cato freedom score. The higher the number, the more freedom. The y-axis shows the infant mortality rate. The higher the score, the more infants die. Who die? Although he didn't mention in the column, if you follow the link, you'll see Krugman explain that the size of the dot is a proportional to the state's population. That's why California is so big. So Krugman is arguing that there is a positive correlation between these two variable meaning that as you increase the state's freedom, as Cato measures it, you tend to get a higher infant mortality. Thus, Krugman thinks he has shown just how silly this measure is and why serious analysts shouldn't be so simple-minded in focusing on libertarian objectives. There are several problems with Krugman's tongue-in-cheek analysis. First, notice of the rhetorical sleight of the hand that I put in bold in the quotation above. Krugman tweaks New Hampshire's live free or die motto to say live free and die. Then it adds New Hampshire is just behind Florida. But hang on a second. New Hampshire is just behind Florida in the ranking of freedom. That's where New Hampshire is almost as far to the right as Florida is. In other words, New Hampshire is ranked number 2 in the Cato list, while Florida is number 1. Yet, ironically, as Krugman's own charts show, New Hampshire has just about the lowest infant mortality rate of the 50 states. The CDC ranking says in 2016, New Hampshire's infant mortality rate was the second lowest in the country, behind only Vermont. Thus, Krugman's joke doesn't make any sense. The state whose motto he is mocking does indeed live up to its reputation of freedom. It's ranked number 2 according to Cato's measure. Yet it also has the second lowest rate of infant mortality too. Yet someone reading Krugman's column, seeing the New Hampshire is just behind Florida, in conjunction with Krugman's joke, might have assumed Krugman meant that New Hampshire had a bad mortality rate. After all, it doesn't make sense for Krugman to be pointing out New Hampshire on the chart if it completely violates his point. Stepping back, even the scatter plot as a whole doesn't really accomplish what Krugman wants. Visually, he is seeing what he wants to see. Krugman thinks it's clear, especially if you read his tweet about it, that the best fit line would be upward sloping in the chart. Yet that is largely because of the New York and California. If you exclude them from the analysis, the remaining cloud of states looks like it might exhibit a downward slope. We don't need to speculate. I asked Jason Sorens, one of the co-authors on the Cato study, to crunch the numbers. He did it a few different ways. First, he concluded all the states and found that the correlation, specifically the Pearson coefficient between infant mortality and freedom, was 0.20. Keep that in mind, that a correlation of 1.0 occurs when two variables are perfectly positively linearly correlated, while 0.0 means they are not at all linearly correlated. Even here, the correlation was statistically significant. There was too much variability, not enough data points to be confident in the observed relationship. Sorens also checked my intuition. If you remove New York and California from the data, then the correlation between infant mortality and freedom drops 0.07, meaning no relationship one way or the other. Finally, Sorens did what he thought was the most sensible adjustment. He kept the data for all 50 states, but he controlled for the state being the South and for per capita income. Doing that, correlation between infant mortality and freedom drops to 0.03. Obviously, what is happening here is that there are omitted variables that is not freedom per se causes a state to have a higher infant mortality rate. For whatever reason, in recent years, states which relatively more freedom also happens to have higher infant mortality rates through the correlation every week. Calling Krugman's bluff. Now I imagine Krugman would say, exactly, that's my point. You libertarians narrowly look at the world in terms of freedom as you define it, meaning freedom from government meddling in your personal life and business. But there is more to life than Ayn Rand. If a big government uses regulation regulation and tax receipts too, and guarantees health care and good schools, they would expect to see high quality of life go hand in hand with low scores of economic freedom. Yet, if this is the general argument Krugman would pursue, he runs into a problem, even though he can find particular correlations that are amusing, such as looking at the most recent infant mortality data, just as among the 50 U.S. states. And sure, it looks like focusing narrowly freedom is goofy. But places like Fraser Institute and Heritage Foundation have produced global rankings of countries. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of empirical studies showing that economic freedom at the national level is indeed statistically associated with all sorts of desirable social indicators. To avoid confusion, the Cato measure of freedom is broad, whereas Fraser and Heritage ranking focus specifically on economic freedom. Back in 2009, Lauren McQuillan and I did a study for the Pacific Research Institute titled "The Sizzle of Economic Freedom" that summarized some things of these findings. For example, using samples covering several continents and decades of observation. The details differ from the study to study, which we describe studies that showed economic freedom being associated with higher personal income, lower unemployment rates, faster economic growth, more business startups, and more macroeconomic stability. This was perhaps expected, but we also showed that economic freedom was positively associated with lower levels of inequality, a cleaner environment, lower childhood mortality rate, higher life expectancies at birth, and higher measures for political freedom. For more research along these lines, check out Fraser's page dedicated to its Economic Freedom Index. Which states do workers prefer? Voting with their feet. To drive home his main point, Krugman contrasts the different forms of power freedom that citizens in New York face compared to Florida. Remember that New York scored the lowest on Cato's ranking, while Florida scored the highest. But seriously, do the real differences between New York and Florida make New Yorkers less free? New York is a highly unionized state. Does it make New Yorkers less free, or does it empower them to face of the corporate power? Also, New York has expanded Medicaid and tried to make ACA exchange work. So that only 8% of non-elderly adults are uninsured, compared with 18% in Florida. Are New Yorkers chafing under the heavy hand of health law, or do they feel freer knowing that they are at much less risk of being ruined by medical emergency or cast into the abyss if they lose their job? If you are a highly paid professional, it probably doesn't make much difference, but my guess is that most workers feel at least somewhat freer in New York than they do in Florida, Krugman both added. Well, I guess it would be very hard to truly get inside everybody's head, but here's a simple test to see. With set policies people prefer, look at where they live. Namely, if they tend to see people moving out of states with high taxes and excessive regulations and into states with low taxes and light regulations, then that's pretty good evidence that Krugman is dead wrong. Fortunately, here we have a convenient map of domestic migration if we grab from this Business Insider report, right? Business Insider article. And you can see here that more, like it says here, for migration, South Carolina, 9.9, Arizona, 9.1, Oregon, 9.3, Idaho 4.6, 14.6, and the people are leaving out of Wyoming 14.7, and Florida is 7.8, and people leaving Alaska and Hawaii minus 13.4 and 9.5. And even Louisiana, Mississippi, people are leaving. Folks are going to Arkansas, Colorado, Montana, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia minus, and West Virginia is minus 5.7. New Hampshire is 3.5. So we can really go on many things. In D.C. and Maryland, too, they're like losing in North Dakota. So it's very interesting. The people leaving New Mexico, too. Wow. Something to look at. What this map shows in its domestic migration into or out of state as a fraction of the state's population. So to be clear, these figures exclude immigration from abroad and just keep track of many people internally moved in or out of state from July 1st, 2016 to July 1st, 2017. Positive numbers mean more people moved into a state, and negative numbers mean more people moved out on net. If you compare this map with Krugman's scatter plot, you can see a general pattern. The states with low levels of economic freedom, i.e. the ones on the left in Krugman's plot, tend to be losing population, i.e. have negative numbers in the map. For example, California lost 3.5 out of 1,000 of its population. We just considered a domestic migration, while New York lost a whooping 9.6 residents out of 1,000. In contrast, the highest level of economic freedom are gaining people. For example, Florida gained 7.8 per 1,000 residents, and New Hampshire gained 3.5 per same thing. You can try it the other way too. For example, the Business Insider map shows that Wyoming lost 14.7 out of 1,000 of its population in terms of internal migration. The Cato Interactive map indicates that Wyoming was ranked 38th in economic freedom, i.e. toward the bottom. In contrast, Arizona gained 9.1 per 1,000 population in this measure, and Cato ranking says it has a freedom ranking of 9 in the country. Yeah, exactly. And you have to, like I say, my friends, you have to look at these things, supply and demand. And even Utah, 5.8 out of 1,000 people moving there. So think about it. You got to look at these things a lot bigger. And as I said, now to be sure that there are some problems with my approach. Most serious, I believe that the way these calculations work, borders of states like California, but also Texas, get dinged because they have large flows of foreign immigrants coming in, who then eventually might move to internal states. Even so, that type of issue doesn't explain away the clear pattern that holds even among the internal states. More generally, I recognize there are other factors at play besides economic freedom. For example, distant places like Hawaii and Alaska might have a net outflow simply because many people who are born in those states end up moving away at some point for reasons that aren't really due to low degree economic freedom in my hometown. Despite these caveats, I think the aggregate flow of population among the 50 states is much a better indicator of how people subjectively evaluate pros and cons of economic freedom. And it seems as if they tend to flock to states that do better on Cato's ranking, people do indeed seem to be fleeing from socialist hellhole where Krugman resides. Indeed, this is just my theory. I once read a Nobel economist who said, but all too many blue states end up in practice letting zoning be a tool, not of good land use, but of NIMBYism, preventing the construction of new housing. In fact, liberal in the non-political sense, land use policy is probably the secret behind Texas economic growth. The state doesn't offer higher wages, but it does offer cheap housing even in huge metro areas. Who was this mystery economist who argues that Texas minimal zoning regulations explain a strong economy? Longtime readers know that when I'm being coy, it's because I'm quoting Paul Krugman to make point. Conclusion, Paul Krugman tried to mock the idea that a ranking of U.S. states by economic freedom was a useful exercise. He put words into authors' mouths by sarcastically saying New York must be a socialist hellhole, even though literally the next day Krugman pointed out to the behavior of a few state legislators to argue that American democracy is on the verge of disappearing. More substantive, Krugman argued that freedom was the only one of the several things important to Americans, and that a strong government could provide other desirable goods, such as protection from employers and health insurance, yet empirical studies show that over long stretches and across multiple states, economic freedom really is positively associated with all sorts of measures, including not just income and GDP growth, but also a cleaner environment, lower childhood mortality, and measures of political freedom. Finally, if we restrict our attention to the U.S., we see that Americans tend to move out of low freedom states into high freedom states, believe it or not. Professor Krugman, most people don't share your enthusiasm for big government. And he is right. And even, like I said, I live in Florida, and I'm a little bit amazed about that. Yes, there are pros and cons that happen in government, but like I said to people before, it can be countered. It can make things better. We all take the initiative. Yes, is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. I don't like seeing luxurious pigeonholes over where I live. It is a complete turnoff. We have a homeless issue as well in Broward County, but it's happening in a lot of places also. We have to really look at all this in the bigger picture, and even a lot of good folks out there have disturbing issues in that community, but there's many that can take the initiative on working. I see it right through these individuals. I'm no expert. I'm not making any judgment. Yes, Florida has its issues. Yes, I know that. But people complain about South Florida too much. I go, what are you going to do about it? They don't say a word. I tell them to shut up. That's it. That's how you got to look at it. So whatever you do, folks, choose wisely. And regardless where you live. And always, if you want to make your state that has freedom issues, counter it. Be proactive. Make it better. Trust me. It's not going to happen overnight, but in a long period of time, you're going to pat yourself in the back and say thank you for standing up. And that is it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you said something interesting you may check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence to Decorum. I will give you all my social media sites on my Spreaker page, including both my emails. And if you want to do that, LookYourLuck3 at gmail.com, or to encrypted ones with the Proton Mail account. LookYourLuck03 at ProtonMail.com. All right, my friends. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Till next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.